Well, Rachel was looking at this book and said, all right, you're going to have recipes today. And it is. It's called Start Again from Scratch, which is pretty neat because our Daystar restaurant or bistro is called The Scratch.
That's right.
But this is a recipe for relationships, particularly marriage. A no-fail recipe for reviving your marriage. And let me tell you about Steve and Lane. Steve is a geologist, and he is the head of Kraft Companies, a conglomerate of more than 50 different businesses. I can't hardly keep up with one. I don't know how he keeps up with 50 plus. And Lane is involved in all kind of entrepreneurial things, including, how do you say it? Whoa, Women's Magazine. And she'll tell us more about that. So it's an amazing story. Our dear friend Lisa Osteen Comas recommended them. They're from the state of Florida. Please join Joni and me as we welcome Steve and Lane Kraft. And Joni and Lane have both gotten the hot pink
We did.
going.
We did.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes.
Okay, now Steve, I have only shook her hand, but I can tell she's a live one.
She has a lot of energy. And every day is a new day and a different day.
How do you keep up with her?
Don't compete anymore.
You're a wise man. I learned about that a long time ago, and people send in letters and they'll say to Joni and her husband. One time it was Joni and Malcolm. So that's okay. I celebrate Joni and the great woman of God that she is. Well, let's get right into this because a lot of people are having problems in marriage. And I think one of the biggest reasons is God generally puts opposites together because we both have strengths and weaknesses to complement one another. But most of us, we set out on a goal to change him or change her and try to create them in our image instead of the image that God created them to. So, Lane, is that true? Do a lot of us try to do that and it never works, does it?
It never works. The thing about it is, you know, if we keep trying to change each other, we never get a chance to look at ourselves. And I think that's where we have to get to. And that's certainly where we got to. We were trying to, as Steve said, compete. It was as if we were opponents in a marriage instead of being on the same team. It's like, who's doing more laundry? Who's doing what with the kids? Who's making more money? We were constantly at each other's throats in a competition. But when we turned that around and we started to look at each other as a team member.
That's so good. You know, I'm a golfer, and sometimes I start off really good, and sometimes I start off really bad. And I wished I could just start all over. And really, that's what you're talking about, Steve, in this book. Starting again, start from scratch. Just throw out all the bad history and let's just start all over again. How do you do that, first of all, and why is that important?
It was her idea, but through the marriage in 17 years, and the devil has a lot of time to get in there and work on things. And when we finally got to a breaking point, there was just too much burden for anybody to carry. So you just make up your mind. You choose good over evil. It was good to save my family. It was good to save my marriage. It was good to be good relationship with God. It was bad to throw away my marriage. It was a choice, good over evil. But to begin it, you get on your knees with your spouse, you ask, you confess to one another and to God, and you offer forgiveness to one another, and God comes in the mix and forgives you. And in an instant, when you look into her eyes, everything was different.
Oh, I'm so glad to see your heart touched. And let me just say this for those of you that have had a different experience. It takes two.
Yes.
And you both have to be willing. And if one of the partners is not willing, don't you feel condemned because you couldn't will them to do the right thing. Joni?
So I know in the book you talk about the first 17 years were really bad. I mean, the first 17 years, in the first, I guess, 3 years, you had 4 children, 2 miscarriages,
Oh my goodness.
2 kids. So, Lane, talk a little bit why. How did y'all even stay together for 17 years if it was bad the first
And,
17?
and how did y'all stay alive?
Well, that's
Nobody was killed.
right. Well, first of all, we had 2 miscarriages and 3 children. We have 2 sons and a daughter.
Okay.
And you know, I don't know. We just got into a bad dance. You know how some marriages, we just got into a bad dance. I mean, finances. We were both entrepreneurs from the day we said I do. So just running our own companies, the stress of financial there, wouldn't you say, Steve? And just life, you know, just aging kids and things like that.
It wasn't super bad all at once. It was like debt or anything else. It happens very gradually.
Yeah.
And my wife wasn't the devil. The devil's the devil.
Yeah.
My wife's my wife.
but he would say I was the devil.
Oh, no.
He'd say, am I living with the devil?
Yeah.
Oh, my
You know, it
goodness.
was that bad, y'all.
But she probably wasn't angelic the whole time either, was
No.
But he is now.
Oh,
wouldn't tell.
absolutely. It's
Absolutely.
perfect.
Well, I think one of the things that for anybody who gets married, and you have to understand, Pastor Robert Morris says this, if you're going to get married, prepare to die, because it's a very unselfish thing. And if you're not putting that other person first and you're very unselfish, you're not going to have a happy marriage, are you, Steve?
1 Corinthians, it talks about love, and nothing's going to work when you're thinking about yourself. And we had perspective changes. She used to be angry that I was working all the time. And after a perspective change, which involves empathy, she said, aren't I lucky to have a husband who works so hard for his family?
Aw.
And I didn't change a thing. She just changed the perspective. But love's that way. And as long as you're worried about yourself and what you're getting or what you're not getting, that's the perspective change. You have to provide for them, forgive them, and in like return they'll do for you. And then God can be there.
And I
with
think it's
you.
so countercultural, y'all, to think about someone else. You know, we're told to be all about ourselves, do what
Yeah.
feels good. You know, if it doesn't make you feel good, you know, whatever. I mean, it is so countercultural to look at a husband or wife and say, listen, what can I do for you today? You know, how can we make us better? You know, there's not a voice out there either. I have to say this today because we've been through it and we didn't really have anybody say, oh, there's hope. They said, y'all are miserable. You're living on opposite ends of the house. You know, y'all just need to probably divorce.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we wanted somebody to say, with God, anything can happen. And that's why we call it resurrection, because God truly resurrected this marriage. He did.
So what changed? He says that you both had a perspective change. What were your problems with Steve initially, and then how did you change your perspective or your view to appreciate those things instead of fight against them?
Well, I think the first thing I learned to do was to pray for him. You know, I was trying to change him in the physical.
Yeah.
And I just kept saying, Lord, could you help me see him in a different way? And could you touch his heart in a way that he could maybe mirror some of the things I need? And so, you know, I guess the biggest thing was I was angry most of the time because he was working 16 hours a day. I was with 3 kids. We were both, I had an ad agency, so we were both kind of pushing at it. So I just had to start, that perspective change was, he loves me. He's loyal. He's working every day. I mean, I had to just change the things that were so negative in my mind.
He's a good provider.
Oh.
He's trying to take care of the
Sure.
family. Yeah.
I mean, you know, those are things that we don't necessarily look as great positives, but it's everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what else could I want from a husband?
So, Steve, what was your perspective change about Lane?
She came in from a marriage counselor one day and she kissed me. And it had been a while since she'd kissed me. And I knew then that the marriage counselor was pro-marriage. And maybe
You're
a
probably
month,
thinking, keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. I
maybe
like
a month
this.
thereafter, I started going to marriage counselor, and we did that for a year or two, 3 times a week. We made it a priority. And we didn't have to do, the changes we made with one another were the smallest of things.
That's what's so interesting. You know, it wasn't like some just huge thing. It was just every day. Thank you, Steve, for
Kind
going to
words.
work, you know. Yeah.
loving touch, small things that people don't think mean anything, when in fact that's what God lies in. That's where the Holy Spirit is.
So what about the kids? Tell us, are they watching this take place? Because they
yes.
probably had seen both sides of it, right?
Yes, and they were witnesses of everything. I think the irony to this too, Steve was 13 when his own mom and dad divorced.
Oh.
Our son was 13 when I came to Steve and I said, you know what, Steve, if we're going to start again, why not start again with each other? Why not start again with the ones that we said I do to?
Oh,
and literally,
good.
that's when the miracle happened, is when we started again from scratch that day. So yes, the kids got to see, we didn't fight in front of the kids, we loved the kids. You know, we tried to make it look, but kids aren't stupid. They know the tension, they feel it when, you know, we think we're kidding ourselves. So absolutely, it's been great for them to witness, because all three of them are looking for mates right now, so.
Yeah.
One of the greatest rewards I got was my oldest son said, you know, Dad, I got in some trouble, and I did some things, you know, when I was a teenager, but because you and Mom stayed married, it could have been a lot worse. I could have been like some of my friends whose parents didn't stay together, and because I saw you stay together, it made things easy for me to hold it together. And what more could a dad ask for? Doesn't matter how many companies you have, but when your oldest son comes and tells you, thank you, Dad, for not quitting, for doing what you did selflessly, and it's made a difference in my life.
Well, you need to get the book, Start Again from Scratch. How do you make it brand new? And I want to say, in addition to this, the most impactful book that I've ever read, other than the Bible, is the 5 love languages. Find out what your love languages are and what your spouse's are. Steve, it sounds like from what you said, she came and gave you a kiss, and she said sweet things to you. You're probably words of affirmation and physical touch. That's what I am. Well, if your wife is different, then it's not going to be natural for her to do that, because if it's not important to her, she doesn't realize how important it is to you. So you need to get that. And then whatever hers are probably quality time and acts of service. You know, if you're taking out the trash, if you're cleaning up the kitchen or cleaning up the dishes, sometimes that can be so meaningful to a wife. So find out what those love languages are and start speaking one another's love languages. So Lane, what has been the feedback from people that have gotten the book, Start Again from Scratch?
It's been great, and I really want to tell you, if you're watching today or you're listening, we are starting events. Steve and I will come to your place, whether it's a community or a church, for free. And we will go through these steps.
Wow.
And we will go through the recipe on how to revive the dead places in your marriage. And we're just that passionate. Today we need to help people build marriages and keep them together. And we just feel like the Lord is telling us, for such a time as this, you get out there and you help people get their marriages back to an abundance, not lacking, not dead. And so we hope that if you're watching today, that you'll call us or email us and let us come and help with the book, walk through the process.
All right, there is the website, startagainfromscratch.com. And Steve, how meaningful when you're able to help somebody's marriage?
It saves everything. We think that the devil comes and attacks Christian marriages on purpose because the stakes are so high. The reward is so big. If he takes a marriage down, he takes down a lot more than 2 people. He takes down a big family, and it goes multi-generational. So every time we save a marriage, and this is not brain surgery, the steps we took are so simple. And it's really just exposing the lies that the devil has created within your own marriage. Once we expose them and bring the light and the truth, the steps to fix it are so easy. But until the deception is brought forth and made obvious, your mind, you have a battle in your mind, and everything you're thinking is just part of the deception that's been planted.
Well, they've been there, done that, bought, wore the T-shirt, and then started a T-shirt company.
Yes.
So I encourage you to get this book. And let's put up the pictures from some of the covers of Whoa magazine, WHOA. There's Dolly Parton.
Yes.
And I'm sure we've got others we can show. There's Kathy Lee Gifford up there. There's Miss Kay Robertson from Duck Dynasty. So just quickly, Lane, what is WHOA? I'm sure it stands for something.
It does,
So-
but I tell you, it started 10 years ago. It was just a community of women that God asked me to create in Jackson, Mississippi, that met once a week to hear a powerful story of how God is moving today. You know,
Yes.
many of us think that God was just moving in the Bible times. And so he asked me, Lane, would you use your personal testimony? And it started with our marriage transformation and reconciliation. And so each week women would come together, and that grew into a local television show, then grew into a magazine, and then within 6 editions it went nationwide through Barnes and Nobles and all of that. So you know what God did there was he was just using that to share stories that brought him glory.
Wonderful.
And his focus was to bring famous women. So when a woman walked by at Barnes & Noble on that cover, a notice, you know, women would notice that, and then from cover to cover, it would talk about how God, you know, works in our lives.
So WHOA stands for what?
Well, it was women hearing, obeying, and acting on the Word of God. So we didn't just hear the Word or just obey it, but we acted as the hands and feet of Christ.
Yeah, the
sharing
Bible
hope.
says to be not just hearers, but doers of the word.
Yes.
Okay, well, if you need help with your marriage
Yes.
today, get this book. Consider inviting Steve and Lane. Let your pastor's wife or
Yes.
your women's ministry director know, or men's ministry, either way, and invite them to come. And let's put up the information on the screen one more time. There it is, startagainfromscratch.com. And if you need prayer today concerning anything, but particularly for your marriage, call the number. Steve and Lane are living examples of what God can do.
Yes.
But again, as I said earlier, it takes 2 willing vessels, not just one, but 2. But maybe if you pray hard enough, long enough, that other one can turn around if he or she is not currently. It can happen. I've seen it happen. So let's believe God for the very, very best.